I'm a student and teacher of political science. If you want, and I don't like talking about that very much, dwelling in that space for too long, because I'm a doctor of philosophy in politics and international relations. And I've been given the power. When you are graduating, the chancellor says, I give you the power to read and to do all that are pertains to the degree which you have been given. Doctor of Philosophy in Political Science. That means I should be able to read political situations, but not just to read political situations, to continue reading about politics, about history, about international relations, and to study situations and tell you what is happening. If you want, you can listen and do something about it. If you don't want, you can dismiss. That's fine. What matters to me is that I have told you. I have passed the message you've had. What you do with it is up to you. The Gen Z revolution, because this is a revolution, it is not an uprising. An uprising or an insurrection is a momentary rebellion against the state of things, the state of affairs, and people retreat, and it is forgotten about. This is a revolution, and revolutions don't happen in one day. Revolutions happen over a period of time. That there is an accumulation of grievances, an accumulation of unhappiness over a number of years, sometimes over a number of decades. And some of the revolutions in world history, for example, the Russian revolutions of 1905 and eventually 1917, were accumulations of grievances that had lasted several centuries, to the point that when the Bolsheviks were taking over, overthrowing the Russian Tsarist regime in 1907, they were sparked off by what you'd call last straws. But the grievances had been there when the Bolsheviks overran everybody else and took over. The French Revolution of 1789-1792 was also an accumulation of centuries of unhappiness about the state of things in the country. And when the moment came, it rode on the force of spontaneity, and there was nothing to stop it. The American Revolution, 1776 to 1783, was an accumulation of centuries of unhappiness. The Mexican Revolution, 1910-1920, was also a response to an accumulation of factors over the decades. And you could talk about many more other revolutions. What we are witnessing in the country today is a factor of unhappiness with the system, systemic misrule, systemic betrayal that runs across a number of decades. In fact, we could even take it right back to the colonial context, back to 1895, where we would be talking about the partition, the establishment of the protectorate, and afterwards the establishment of the colony in the 1920s, and the unhappiness that our grandparents or great-grandparents experienced, and which was transferred into the independent Kenyan state that has not served the hopes and aspirations of the people that we talk of in the national anthem, which is the Kenyan dream. And so the young people that we are seeing in the streets who are saying that Ruto must go, they're not talking necessarily about William Ruto, the individual who is the president of the public. There's Ruto and there's Rutoism, and this Rutoism is systemic. It has been inherited across historical timelines. And you see, if you remove William Ruto today, the individual from Sugoi, and take him back to Sugoi, and you plant there another person, the system being what it is, Rutoism will carry on, and the youth will still be saying Ruto must go, or whoever is there must go, and the next one and the next. So this is what I mean when I say that there's a revolution in progress, and that the leadership is slipping in the middle of a revolution. That the young people have now broken through the tribal barriers. They have broken through the class barriers. They have broken through the religious divide. They are coming together as an aggrieved demographic that has got nothing to lose except its frustrations. Now, what do I mean by nothing to lose except its frustrations? 40 years ago and slightly more, I was a young student at the University of Nairobi. And we university students used every so often to burst into the streets of Nairobi over one disquiet or the other. And some or most of those disquiets pertained to misgovernance that we perceived to have been taking place in our country. And we would go out, carry placards, protest. We would say, down with imperialism, down with apartheid. We would say, jail the thieves. We would say, so and so must go. And we would go back to the campus. We would go back to the central catering unit. We would have food. Sometimes we complained also about that too. But we nursed the hope of the day when we would leave the university and we would go out and get into jobs. Basically, we dreamt of the day, whether we admitted it or not, when we would also join the system. And many joined the system. Some have now, as we speak, ascended up to the very top of that system. They were absorbed, and we became a part of the problem once we graduated. We melted into the problem and became part of the tissue of that problem. Today, you are dealing with millions of young people who are in the main already in the streets. If they have been to university, they have already come out, they've been disgorged. They are in the streets. And in the streets, they have not found the hopes that they had when they were university students. In fact, in recent years, there's been relatively less student unrest than there was in our time in the 1970s and in the 1980s. There's been less unrest because students have learned that the university education that they are enjoying is an escape route from poverty. But they have gotten out in the streets, because to be in the streets used to mean looking for a job. They say this person is in the streets, this person is stomaching. They are looking for a job. But they have found out that there are no more opportunities left in those streets. because of the misrule that informs their country, that has informed their country over 62 years. So the people who are unfortunate to be in power today are dealing not with a system that, or rather with a resistance that can be contained with truncheons and with guns and with guns. They're dealing with a resistance that can only be sorted out by facing the facts squarely and dealing with them. If I were the person to advise William Ruto today, which fortunately I am not, but if I had the misfortune of being the person to advise him, and the misfortune because he most likely would not listen, and misfortune because I would be part of that system, if I were to be the person to be unfortunate enough to be advising President William Ruto, I would tell him that now you are the symbol of everything that has gone wrong with this country. It does not matter anymore who committed the original sin. And there are people there, there have been who committed the original sin. It was not you. But you are now the symbol. You are the custodian. You are the poster boy of everything that has gone wrong in this country. You are holding the tiger by the tail. And what you should be looking for is the possibility of doing the little that you can towards reform, because it cannot be done within the period that you have. And you only seem to have 2 years. If you are lucky, you will have 7 years. But if you have 7 years, Mr. President, and you continue on the path and in the direction that you have taken, you will not reach the end of the 7 years. The bustling, youthful energy and appetite for change is insurmountable, and you have chosen the wrong methods. You will not crack these skulls open to the point of subduing them. You will not ring fence yourself with a razor wire successfully. Many tried before you. Unfortunately, you are not a student of history. You don't like history. And many have taken the path that you are on today, and it has not happened. So the best things for you to do are two. Number one, listen to these people to the best of your ability. Do some of the things that they are asking for. But they will still reject you. You will be like the Russian monarch who was called Nicholas II, the Tsar Nicholas II. They even called him Tsar the Reformist, because he attempted to reform the Russian Tsarist system, to abolish serfdom, to give the serfs and other slaves a measure of relief from the agonies that they had suffered over years, over centuries. But it did not work, did not serve him, because they had gone too far. So the second thing you need to do is to plan. Let me not lose the thought. Is to plan to dock this ship in a peaceful harbor in 2027 and find a way of exiting, because that space cannot continue.
So, are you by any chance saying that even if President William Ruto does literally everything that the Gen Zs are coming, there is no escape?
First, he does not have the time, so he will not be able to do it. He does not have the time. The reforms that this country needs are going to take something like 10 years at the very minimum. And they are going to require a president who has got both the capacity and the inclination. William Ruto lacks both the capacity and the inclination. He lacks both the ability and the proclivity. He doesn't have that bent. But even if perchance he had, the seed of doubt has been planted in the national memory. They look at him and say, we cannot trust this person. And it's because he comes and promises outrageous things, outlandish things that cannot be realized. He will come and tell Kenyans that building Premier League kinds of stadiums, that after Christmas when you come, you will see them. He will say that we have now converted Korogocho into London, and people can see there's nothing like that. He will say things like you are going to drive cars without engines within the next, I don't know how many months, and nothing like that is happening. So people start doubting him. But they're also looking at the way he's been cracking people's heads open. They're looking at the brains that have been blown up in the streets of Nairobi and other towns. They are looking at the goons who have now been introduced into the streets to try and rescue the system. So people have lost faith in him, and you need a trusting population before you can undertake any meaningful reforms. He does not have that trusting population anymore. It was there in 2003 at the start, but by mid-2003, with the taxation, with the cost of living, with the levels of corruption, with the opaque deals, you look at the Shah system, we don't know who the private entities in it really are, who are the individuals behind it. You look at the affordable housing, we don't know the finer granular details that we need to know. The transparency is not there. So when you put all those together, he lacks a goodwill from the public, and they want him to go. And this thing of Ruto must go is not just an empty mantra of Ruto must go. Ruto will go. And how he goes is the big question. How does he go? He can navigate and pilot his own exit by responding to the constitutional dictates of how a president gloriously and in a dignified fashion exits. Or he can dig in and risk living ignominiously. The choice is up to him. In terms of reform, there are people who have tested a measure of liberty. Social science, liberal philosophy teaches us that. But people who have tested a measure of reform, a measure of liberty, will crave for more, and you cannot push them back. And when you come up with cosmetic, piecemeal attempts at reform, you only sharpen their appetite for more of the reform. In no time, they get completely fed up and they push you over the cliff. That is where President William Ruto is. Unfortunately, he keeps on saying things like, why should we teach history? That we should not fund history. The solution to the issues that are eating him up reposes in proper knowledge of history and the streams that revolutions have followed in world history, and the knowledge that his country is now on that path, and that the piecemeal cosmetic reforms he may attempt to engage in will cast him in the place in which Nicholas II found himself in the first quarter of the 20th century.
Saying that Ruto will go, then it only means it's a matter of time. But again, do you think that all these the protests that you're talking about, and I'm still asking about the Guns as well, but the protest that you're talking about is putting him in a very precarious position. But now you've had the fears exchange between the opposition and also the government. There's actually blame games. Ni wewe hire the Guns, nyinyi mlihire the Guns. Where is that?
You see, the Guns are clearly brought in the government. Let's be very clear about that. They are brought in by the state, and it is a foolish ploy because it backfires. Anyone who has eyes that see, without even needing to think very hard, a commonsensical thing, can see these fellows getting into town, carrying truncheons on a day when there's a demonstration that is supposed to be peaceful. You're not supposed to be carrying those truncheons. And they are festooned and chaperoned by the Kenya police. And the Kenya police are wearing not just regular attire, they are dressed up in combat attire, and they are equipped with allied paraphernalia that goes with combat. And they are working on festooning and chaperoning these Guns. And they are watching, they are looking on as these characters are breaking showroom glass windows. They are doing nothing. But when they see youngsters coming and shouting and screaming, both at them and at the Guns, they are clobbering them. They are cocking their canisters and unleashing. How dense do we need to be in the head not to join the dots and see that these are state-owned and state-sponsored Guns? His Excellency the President and people around him should give us a measure of intelligence, credit us with a measure of intelligence that we can see through these things. Now, if you get to a point where you have descended to the level of trusting not your regular police service or police force, as this one is anyway, to be the one to secure your government in power, that you have now resorted to the Kenyan equivalent of the Haitian Tonton Makut that were put in place by Francois Duvalier when he came to power in 1957, and he saw that the state was becoming threatened, endangered all the time. 2 years later, in 1959, he invented the Tonton Makut, who have sunk the country to where it is today. The parallelisms are very interesting. 1957, 1959, 2 years. William Ruto takes over in 2022. Really effectively, we can say his tenure being on the railroad properly 2023. 2025, we have the Kenyan Tonton Makuts in the streets. Who are his role models? And that here is a president who takes a detachment of the police, the Kenya police, to Haiti, to Port-au-Prince, apparently to contain the Guns. But at the same time, introduces Guns in the streets of his capital, Nairobi, and sends the Kenya police to escort the Guns. So it's a ridiculous place to be, but it speaks to a regime that is then in a taciturn manner, quietly, silently, accepting that it has failed.
So are you by any chance saying, because again they're the same groups that were allegedly suspected in vandalism, also whatever happened in police station, burning the police station and the courts and all that. So are you by any chance saying that the same groups hired by the government are the ones that did that, or we still have another set of groups?
No, it's the same characters. They are saying that, and the psychology is very simple. I don't even need to be a psychologist, but the psychology of it is very simple. That you are trying to send the message out to the wider public and to the business community and peace-loving citizens that these mandamanos are bad, because these mandamanos are leading to vandalism, they are leading to destruction of property, they are leading to a collapse of law and order. It does not require too much thinking to see that these things are happening in Kikuyu. I'm not saying in Kikuyu land. They're happening in Kikuyu. And then we remember what leadership from that space predicted that these things were going to happen. Where do you get all the time in the world to set a police station on fire, burn it, and police vehicles on fire? And the provincial, let's call it the provincial administration offices on fire. Where do you get all the time? It is all orchestrated. It is a clear script, a choreograph that wants the citizens to look at the mandamanos as bad, and therefore to be repelled by any mention of mandamano, and to feel that there are people who are associated with those mandamano and who are the opposition, and that they are bad people, they are bad for the country. That thing backfires, because why aren't you arresting these people? Why aren't you taking them to court? They're not going to arrest them. They're not going to take them to any court, because they are their own hirelings. And when push comes to shove, they will make confessions and talk about who hired them. If you flip that coin to the other side and talk about business, the business community and the economy, if we were to assume, if we must assume, only for the sake of argument, and I say only for the sake of argument, that these were indeed agencies who are burning the station, who are carrying out that vandalism only for the sake of argument, you cannot tell those kinds of people about the economy, because it's an economy out of which they are already shut. They are not part of that economy. They don't understand what you are talking about. Even the goons that you are hiring anyway, they are locked outside that economy. So when you say you are destroying business, they would be asking, for the sake of argument, whose business? Whose economy? Are we part of this economy? And revolutions quite often come in place to bring down the economy. The Haitian Revolution in 1795, there was a revolution in Haiti, which was an accumulation of years of grievances by the black slaves whom C.L.R. James calls the Black Jacobins. And I invite everyone to go and read The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. The Haiti economy at that time was one of the wealthiest economies in the world. In fact, every European power wanted to own Haiti, which was a French colony. And they thought that they were seeing an opportunity to own Haiti because the French monarchy was in collapse. France itself was caving down to the revolution of 1789-1792 under the Jacobins. In France, you remember we had the Jacobins and the Girondins. And the Jacobins were bringing down the Bourbon dynasty of France. And the rest of Europe was seeing an opportunity to own the rich colony that was Haiti and San Domingo. And you have seen that on the other side of that island is the Dominican Republic. That very rich island had some of the poorest people in the world. What George Orwell talks about in Animal Farm, where he says it looked like the farm had grown progressively very rich without the animals themselves being rich. So you can talk about an economy that is thriving, that is doing extremely well, but it is in the hands of an oligarchy. An oligarchy is a set of very few people who are extremely wealthy and who are in power. And many times an oligarchy is also concurrently a kleptocracy. That is a regime that is under thieves. And a kleptocracy can also concurrently be a kakistocracy. A kakistocracy is a regime that is in the hands of the worst elements of the citizenry. And so the majority who are locked out do not understand what you are talking about when you say the economy. And they will bring it down.
With that, of course, when talking about rules and all that, what would be your take on Muluka's remarks? The other day he said something else, but now he came back saying, I did not say that, I said something different.
He's a confused gentleman, a young man, and I call him a young man deliberately and rightly so, because when I first participated in Maandamano in the streets of Nairobi on the 5th of October 1979 as a fresh undergraduate student, Muluka had just been born 6 months earlier. 6 months earlier, on the 12th of March 1979, in a forest near Eldoret. And so he didn't know that there was a Maandamano happening. Even in 1992, when we went through the unfortunate events of the coup attempt, he didn't know that there was something happening that got to be called a coup attempt. So he.
When he was born doesn't have anything to do with it going on.
Where you are born is also important, because even today there are 3-year-olds who have some idea that some things are happening in the country. They may not be clear in their minds, but in his particular case, in a forest, he didn't know what was happening. And if you doubt, go and ask him. If he's honest, he will tell you. But that is not for us to sidestep the point. The point is this: that even at that time, the people who are in power told us that there would be no more maandamano in the country again. They were saying that what has happened will not happen again. And that time we were protesting because there are elections in the offing. Elections that took place on the 8th of November 1979. In those elections, we had woken up to a newspaper headline that read, Anyona and ex-KPU bad. There was only one political party in the country, which was KANU. And for you to participate in an election as a contestant, the party had to clear you. And the party refused to clear George Anyona, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, and all other ex-KPU people who had been progressively released from detention. I've not mentioned how they were detained, never mind. But in truth, all these people served in detention without trial between 1969 and 1978. October 1969 to December 1978. So as university students who flattered ourselves with the thought that we were progressives, we went into the streets to say that they should be allowed to contest. We also went into the streets to demand. I remember Rumba Kinotia outside the Nation House on Tomboya Street on a Kenya Charity sweepstake, a stand that had been capsized and made into a makeshift platform, addressing the journalists from Nation House and who are clicking away with their cameras. Rumba Kinotia telling them, comrades of the press, we demand that Comrade Ngugi wa Thiong'o, we are not asking, we demand that Comrade Ngugi wa Thiong'o be reinstated in his job in the Department of Literature at the University of Nairobi. We demand that Comrade George Anyona be allowed to contest, and Comrade Jaramogi Oginga, they were our comrades because we saw that we were progressives. And we were told never again would there be demos. And the demos continued to be there. And soon we were being told that they would shoot to kill. Attorney General Charles Njonjo issued an order to shoot to kill. But that did not end demos. Today, 40-something years later, we are hearing this thing being said by those who were born the year that we went out to demonstrate, and they are more than 40 years old. And this is where the relevance, the wider relevance of what you are asking me about where and when they were born, not being significant, comes in. That you are echoing today, you are sounding like a sound chamber of the people who tyrannized us at the prime of our youth in the 70s. That those who are born many years after the tyrants of yesteryear are now the new tyrants, and they're telling us it will not happen. That Kithure Kindiki, who was 7 years old in 1979, is now telling us that we will not tell you what we are going to do. Don't ask what we are going to do. We were told those things in the 70s and early 80s of don't ask what we are going to do. So he has said it. And if he has bitten his tongue, he should just come out and apologize. It's more honorable to apologize. In 1979, there were no mobile cell phones in the country. We could not capture you. These days, there's citizen journalism everywhere. And everything you say is being captured, and sometimes not just being captured, it's being transmitted live. Come out and apologize. For President William Ruto, you don't need a juvenile cabinet. It is a juvenile cabinet with juvenile delinquents who don't know what they are doing, who are telling the police to shoot to kill. And you have seen that some police officers are coming out in the open and they are saying, no, we cannot shoot to kill. We will try our best to stay within the law and to arrest. So, Onesimus Kipchumba Murkomen, apologize. And Your Excellency, Dr. William Ruto, apologize also. And then appoint a mature person to the Ministry of Interior. Have Onesimus Kipchumba Murkomen as one more of your economic advisors, marking time, earning a salary, paying his debts. But removing from that bucket is going to take you down faster than you imagine.
During that time, the one you talked about the taxi on the incident, or whatever it matters, we have like people who passed on who died during that time.
I do not recall us being shot to death in the streets as such. We also have one big riddle that has remained unresolved and addressed up to now, that during the 1982 fracas, a busload of students was claimed to have been showered with bullets, and they are thought to have died. I'm not very sure about that. It's something that needs to be investigated. You are aware that we are afraid of the truth, and that our March 2013 TJRC report, 2,210 pages, telling us about historical injustices, is rotting in Parliament. It needed to have been implemented. That would help bring out some of those truths. Be that as it may, there are people like Tiger Adimosi, who was arrested at that time and who died in jail. Be that as it may, it's also recalled that in those early 80s, there are lots of people who died around Nyayo House. The reports used to say that they had committed suicide. These stories of prisoners committing suicide are not new. In the early 80s, we used to wonder why people were going to Nyayo House and jumping down there. And some people even used to joke about it and saying, oh, this one is about to go to Nyayo House to jump down to die. It turns out that those people were killed in those death dungeons, and then their bodies flung out of Nyayo House. So as Albert Camus would say, to kill is to kill. Whether you kill with a gun, or you kill with bludgeoning, or you kill by strangulation, to kill. So through that analytical part, there are people who are killed. But has that stopped agitation? It hasn't. Agitation will go on until such a day as there is a systemic change. And systemic change I need to repeat for purposes of empathy is not about the removal of William Kipchirchir, Arab Samoei, Arab Ruto. That one is just the current custodian of that system. It is a fundamental change that shifts away from all the theft, all the bribery, from goonhood and gunhood that puts in place proper use of our taxes, rationalizes our taxes, that addresses the cost of living, that restores education, that restores the healthcare system, that restores our roads, that restores our agriculture, that restores human dignity, that above all, in a secure environment, creates jobs and generates wealth that takes us back to the creed and promise of the Kenyan national anthem. If that is not done, even those who will take over after President William Ruto, let them be warned in advance that Kenyans are going to demand that they go. Even the next president and the next and the one after and the one after, if they are not going to get it right, Kenyans are going to agitate. And one of them might be the unfortunate one who will be driven all the way to the Indian Ocean. So we would have President William Ruto understand that, Mr. President, this is not about you, it's about the system. And even after you, we are likely to be still saying the same things. We used to say Moi must go, and Moi went. But we are still saying the same things because we did not address the system.
Looking at all of these things, do you think that Mr. William Ruto has actually lost the business? And maybe of that again, the other day, he was kind of about to say that he's not going to hand over, power to the government.
Whether they have agenda or not is immaterial. The handing over of power is not any individual's prerogative. It falls outside his ken. It's not one of the things about which he can make a decision. He could in fact be arrested. For treason? No, not for saying that. For refusing to hand over power. Perish the thought. Because it's not one of his status. Once a proper election has been conducted and we have lost that election, he should come and hand over the instrument. But in any case, even if he doesn't hand over the instrument, the transition will go on because the law talks about the installation of the new president and the new deputy president. And nowhere do they say that we must hand over these things. These are not the things that people used to fight over in the kingdom of Mwene Mutapa or the Kazembe kingdom, where you say this is the person who is holding the royal spear and the royal drums. That is, the royal drums of the Nabongo have not been handed over. That this person is the one who is carrying Omukata. And since he's the one carrying Omukata, he still continues to be there. No, there's something Waswahili wanasema wengi wake na usipowapa watajichukulia. So he doesn't have that. Has he lost legitimacy? No, he hasn't lost legitimacy. Legitimacy is in the Constitution. By the same token that he cannot overstay his time when comes to an end. By that same token, he also cannot lose his legitimacy by the things he's doing. But he has lost the moral authority to continue being in office because of perception of betrayal by those who voted for him, by those who campaigned for him, by those who gave him the benefit of doubt at the start of his tenure. The moral high ground is lost. And that is something he must think about each time he looks in the mirror to see whether his necktie is properly adjusted. He should remember that this person I'm seeing in the mirror has lost the moral authority. The legitimacy may be there, but the moral authority is lost. It was a mere formation of words that vaporized the moment they left his lips. Meaningless words that turned into water vapor and disappeared into the elements the moment they left his lips. For you need just look at what has happened since that time. How many deaths we have seen, how many arrests, false arrests there have been, and you will know that he ain't managed. He does not have the ability or the proclivity to be apologetic. Remorse is the child of a contrite heart. But there's contrition, and contrition is about inner dialogue with your soul. And the soul advises itself and advises you that you have gone astray, that you have faith. But then you come out in true penitence. And out of penitence, you receive forgiveness. And you must mention the things you have committed by name, because things are known by first and name. But you cannot come and start uttering verbal conjunctives and saying things like, if I have wronged you. It's not a conditional phrase affair. It's an indicative phrase affair where you say, I have done this and I have done that, and I repent and I seek forgiveness from you, my brothers and sisters, and from God. Actually, is a terrible historical accident that should never have happened in the trade union movement in this country. He lacked the intellectual depth and sophistication to understand even the labor concerns that he should be addressing. When Kenyans are differing in the streets, when Kenyans are wallowing in poverty, workers, others in a state of joblessness, which are the things he should be addressing? He spends a lot of time bargaining for those in power. He has become their puppet, successively their puppet. And he turns his court with amazing ease from this custodian to the next custodian. He should know that they are Gen Z who are senior Gen Z, because to be a Gen Z, you don't have to be measured through what you would call chronological metrics. To be Gen Z, you will be measured through your ideological orientation, which means that there are young people within that chronological docket, young people who were born between 1987 and 2010-2012, who may not qualify for ideological purposes to be called Gen Z. we have seen some of them being taught by the system, including some whom we saw in the streets, clad in three-piece suits, 4 pieces in the pocket, and 5th and 6th pieces on their lapels. We have seen them being procured by the state. We have seen some of them clad in counter suits, gravitating across the country, ostensibly telling us about which projects have gone proper. But we have seen them being procured by the state. So, a certain age, certain demographic is not going to define who is Gen Z and who is not. The persons who are Gen Z are going to be defined by their ideological orientation. Progressives, free thinkers, supporters of liberal democracy, human rights, equity, fairness, justice, those are Gen Z. And CJ Emeritus David Maraga is a senior Gen Z.
What is the feeling of Gen Z, Barrack?
You know, Gen Z, I have told you
What
that
you say is a
you are senior Gen Z. And please understand that I probably have better grasp of the notion of categorization of people's in age demographics than a lot of people do. That they talk about people who were born between 1928 and 1945 as the silent generation because their voices have not been known to have been heard over anything. And then there are the baby boomers who were born between 1946 and 1955. They are baby boomers 1. And they're called baby boomers because when the war ended in 1945, the soldiers returned home and there was a lot of idle capacity. And so they engaged in the processes that produced people. And there was a baby boom within that period. And so the Americans referred to those people as the baby boomers. Then they also discovered that it was continuing between 1956 and 1965. So they said, oh, these are baby boom second generation. Then the fellows who were born from 1965 to 1976 were called Generation X, meaning X boom. Okay? They are called X boom. Then there are fellows who are born between 1976 and 1987, who were then called millennials because we were starting to move towards a new millennium. But as this was happening, the digital economy was now beginning to pick up. The digital technology was beginning to pick up, and there were people who were born between 1987 and 2010-2012, the Zoom generation, because they were Zoomers, zooming in and out in the digital technology. So they are called the Gen Zs, Generation Z. That is chronologically, demographically. But as often, yes, for Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why they are called Gen Zs. But beyond that, we know that certain appellations start assuming new significance. People who have studied historical and comparative linguistics will tell you about the notional change of reference and reference. So in this case, it assumes an ideological dimension that people who are free thinkers, people who are votaries of good governance, of democracy, of human rights, of responsibility and accountability in government, they become Gen Zs after our Gen Zs who exploded in the streets of Nairobi and elsewhere in the country in June, July last year. So, I restate, Chief Justice Emeritus David Maraga is a senior Gen Z, and let Francis Atwoli understand.